For your new book, Ashland, the idea started with the world, but you say you usually don't start that way. You usually start with plot. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so I'm a very plot-heavy writer. I love the intricate plots. I love thinking things out through plot. So I tend to start all my ideas with like a concept, a scenario. And the idea for Ashland came about is very obvious to anyone who reads the description. It's a dystopian detective novel. It was inspired by the COVID pandemic. And we were 2 weeks into it, and I was walking with my family through the streets of Burbank, and it was totally empty. It was like 7 o'clock at night, totally empty. And I was thinking in my writer brain, how could this be worse? And I was like, well, at least we can go outside. We have to wear masks and stuff, but at least we can still go outside. If we couldn't go outside again, that would be terrible. And I was like, what if we couldn't go outside again? So that question immediately was like, why? Why wouldn't we be able to go outside again? So I started with kind of this whole concept of what this world would be. And then I had to figure out what story do I want to tell in that world. So in the world of Ashland, because it took me a while to even figure out what is the thing that's keeping people trapped inside. Is it a virus? Is it like an alien organism? Is it something else? And then I saw this video about these things called xenobots, which are programmable cells that can self-replicate. So they want to use these to like deliver medicine in a body in the way like white blood cells do, which is great. But again, my writer brain said, well, what if you program them to do something bad? What if you program these cells to like eat human flesh, eat muscle proteins? And so that, when I had that idea, I was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. There's a classic sci-fi trope called gray goo, about like this thing, like an organic mass takes over the world and can self-replicate. So that was really cool to me. So I had that, and then I had to figure out what kind of story do I want to tell in that world. And eventually I came to doing like a classic detective story. It's like an LA detective story I thought would be really fun, because how do you interview witnesses and collect evidence if you can't go outside, unless you're in a hazmat suit? So that's kind of where that idea came from.
And you've talked about previously how much you love the outdoors, how it's very important for you to be outside.
Yeah, once a day I need to go outside. Even during the pandemic, we'd put on our masks, we'd go outside. We were like spritzing ourselves with like alcohol wipes. So that idea, and I think it's very cathartic for me. Even though it's a dystopia, I keep pitching it to people and saying, like, actually, it's very hopeful, because to me, I love dystopian stories, because you watch a dystopian movie, you read a dystopian novel, and then you go, well, my life isn't as bad as that. So it's almost a relief to watch those movies. And so this book was very therapeutic for me, that as we were dealing with all this COVID stuff, because I couldn't go to coffee shops to write, I couldn't go out, what I would do is I would go in the car with my 5-year-old, I would drive around until he fell asleep, and then I would park someplace overlooking Los Angeles and try and write as fast as possible while he was asleep. But for me, it was a way to get out of my head for a couple hours of like this pandemic we're dealing with, all this horrible news. Like, at least this is worse. I remember coming home at the end of every day and I would hug my wife and kids, because it was like, you don't understand, I was in this terrible world, but you guys are here and everything's okay just in our house. So it was very, it felt good to work on that and set it aside.
Sure. And we didn't know how it was going to end at that time.
Yeah.
We could compare it to, let's say, 1918 or whatever, but that didn't end well. And so, it was very scary. How do you intelligently design a story? What's your writing process?
So I tend to start all my stories in a very similar way, because I'm very structured. And I talk to other people about this, and some creatives, I think, like creativity because it can be very free form. I like to have structure. And so I use kind of a combination of Blake Snyder's Save the Cat ideas and this other writer, Paul Joseph Galino's screenwriting sequence approach, where there's basically every story has 8 sequences. So anytime I come up with any idea, I will start to think about, the first thing I'll do is if I have an idea, like a what if scenario or a concept or something, I will just sit down and try and see how much, give myself an hour and see how much I can type. And if I can fill about a page of just ideas, it might be dialogue, it might be set pieces, I feel like, all right, there's something there, there's something interesting to me about this idea. Then I'll start to rough it out as a skeletal structure using those 8 sequences. Like, what happens in sequence 1? What happens in sequence 2? What's the midpoint? What does the third act look like? And it just starts to give me like a general shape of what the story could be. Then I'll go through sometimes and I'll start to put in ideas for scenes under those sequences. but I do try to keep it kind of loose. I just want to be able to like stand back from it, see the shape of it, and then I'll generally start drafting pages of some kind. I'll do some character stuff too, like I'll be thinking about the characters and their backstories a little bit, but I really like to discover things while I'm writing. I feel like if it's too thought out, it's hard to, I feel like I've told the story already. So I like to be a little unsure about where it's going.
And this is only for screenwriting? You don't do this for novels, or you do?
I do the same, yeah. I kind of have the same approach for it, for novels and screenplays. When I first started writing novels, it was very difficult to transition because I spent years learning. I started off writing prose and plays, and then I spent a decade or more just doing screenplays. And screenplays are all about boiling it down, almost like poetry, very simple lines of description. So I had learned that, and then when I went to novels, I was like, oh, I need to describe everything again. So it was like going from being a sprinter to a marathoner. And so that took me several years. Now I feel like I can almost like change gears in a car. I'm like, I'm in screenplay mode, I know how to do that, here we go. And now I'm in novel mode. So I actually have a novel I'm working on right now that's an adaptation of a screenplay I wrote that we kind of took it out, there was some interest, but it didn't end up selling, so now I'm adapting it as a novel. And so that's interesting to like go from one gear to the other.
Right. Hopefully your clutch is good. You can engage
Yes.
it, right?
Well, I'm noticing, like I was working on it just yesterday, and as a screenwriter, I was like, I didn't do myself any favors here. I need to describe this whole room. I didn't say anything about the room that this scene is going to take place in.
Well, I think you said previously that with a novel, it's I think, and then with...
Yeah, so I didn't coin this.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I forget who said this. But I say it all the time. But the idea is that with a play, with a novel, it's I think. With a play, it's I hear. And with a film, it's I see. And I think that's a great way to just think about the different ways of telling the stories. If you're writing a screenplay and almost all the stuff is happening in the dialogue, that might not be the best movie because it's just talking heads. We need visuals. We need visual stuff happening. In a novel, if you're just writing a bunch of dialogue and you're not getting inside the backstory of the characters, you're not getting into the characters' thoughts, that might not be the best novel. Like that's what novels can do really well is there's this great novel called The Mezzanine by Nicholson Baker, which the whole action of the book is just a character going from the first floor of a hotel to the mezzanine. And the whole novel is the thought process in her head is the whole time. That to me is the epitome of what a novel can do, that you couldn't do that as a play, you couldn't do that as a movie.
Unless it's a courtroom scene, let's say, like
Sure.
a Few Good Men or something, then you want just rapid fire dialogue.
Right, and what's interesting so some things I think work in all media, right? Like A Few Good Men was a play first, written by Aaron Sorkin, and then when they adapted it to a movie, it's like that works very well as a movie. I think the reason it works so well as a play and a movie is you can sit in the audience, even if I'm in the back row, I can hear the great Aaron Sorkin dialogue of that back and forth. If I'm watching the movie, I can go in on that close-up for Jack Nicholson saying you can't handle the truth, and it's like a nuclear bomb going off.
You like to write and leave room for details and discovery. Can we talk about that? What is this process and why is this helpful for you?
Yeah, I love to, again, like I said earlier, I don't like to have everything planned out in the outline stage. I like to find things and discover things because I think, and again, I'm not the first person to say this, but I think you're the first audience for anything you write. And if you are finding yourself bored or uninterested or your attention's wandering or you're going on social media a lot, then the story is not going to be engaging for anybody else. Whereas if you're locked in, if you are really wanting to figure out where it goes next, the audience is going to feel the same way. The reader is going to feel the same way. So I like to have that process happen. And when it really is working, it's amazing. I have a book I just finished a few weeks ago, and there was this moment in it where this character, this young teenage kid, was in a situation, and he suddenly pulled out a gun. And I was like, how did he get a gun? I didn't know he had a gun. I had no idea he had a gun until that moment. And then I thought about it, I was like, he got the gun here. He stole the gun earlier. Of course he did, because that character would totally do that. So it was this amazing moment of like the character was almost telling me what he wanted to do, and it made sense for the character, and I just had not realized it. And I maybe would have never plotted it out if I had done every little detailed point. So there's other times when characters will say things and I'm like, I had no idea you felt that way. Let's take that further. Let's explore that. So it's almost like you're transmitting, you're receiving something from another transmitter. And I don't know where it comes from, but having that openness to be able to find those answers on the actual day you're writing, I think is really important to me.
Right. Was it David Foster Wallace who said that when you read a novel, it's like getting into the author's skin? You're like living within it.
I love that. Yeah. How can it not be? I think if you are not making something that is truly exposing yourself, it's automatically going to feel distancing, not as interesting. And the stuff I think we're really drawn to me, it's such a great lesson. The more specific you are to yourself, the more interesting it will be to everybody. It's a weird, you think, oh no, if I was more generic. No, that's not it at all. It's that specificity that we think of. Like, think of people like David Lynch or Boots Riley or Cronenberg or Wes Anderson. We know those names because of the hyper-specificity of the way they told their stories. David Foster Wallace is a great example too. It's like you have a link to his brain as he's writing.
What is a character trying to be the best version of themselves? You say you like to read stories where, be great in life if everybody tried to do that as well, but where people are, the characters trying to be the best version of themselves. Yeah,
I think it's interesting because I think there's two sides to that can be dramatically interesting. I love when characters are trying to be the best versions of themselves because I think this is what stories do in general, is they can give us answers we don't get in life. They give us resolution, they give us thematic unity, they give us, we get to see all those things happen that we wish we could do. And life is not that way. Life is kind of messy, it doesn't have a structure, it's chaotic. We don't know what the resolution is going to be until after it's over. So I think stories are great at that. I think character-wise, we love to see characters trying to succeed where we couldn't. Like, people love underdogs. You think about like Rocky or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, like somebody who's really out of their depth that is trying really, really hard. I love a character like that. On the other hand, I also love a character who is like inadvertently being the worst version of themselves, where you're watching them make mistake after mistake and you're saying, why would you do this? But you're locked in. Like Breaking Bad is a great example. Walter White is a character who starts at kind of an okay place and he just goes worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's fascinating to watch, again, because you say, well, I would never do that. I wouldn't make those choices. But that's really fascinating to watch dramatically, I think. I think I probably tend more towards the first one, just because if I'm going to spend my time every day working on a story, hours and hours a day, I want to leave feeling hopeful and not dour and depressed, when I'm done with the work.
Right. Well, and that seems to be a theme with you, that you want to shed light and bring hope to something, even dystopian.
I think that's absolutely true for me. I am always trying to, and probably because personally it's hard. In my own brain, I think I go back and forth a lot between glass half empty, glass half full. And I feel like if I can creatively focus on the optimistic side of things, find ways of having stories that do have happy endings and have good resolutions and people solving their problems, that gives me a little bit of sense that maybe I can do that too, that we can do that in our lives as well.
Sure, but then again, not everybody's hardwired like that. So
No.
Do you see with some of your students, they do like to write things that maybe have more of an open-ended?
Absolutely, which is great. And I like watching that stuff a lot. Like, I love, David Lynch is probably my favorite filmmaker, and he is the least clear resolution person you could pick. And that's why I love it, because of he doesn't care. He doesn't need to explain it to you. And I think that's amazing and fascinating. And I feel like there's still an answer in there that you can figure out if you really pay attention. But he doesn't need to give it to you on a silver platter. Whereas I definitely feel like I want people to kind of come away like, this is what I was going for. But so I love watching that kind of stuff. Just personally in my work, it's not my personal taste.
Sure, makes sense, okay. Do you write the genre that you love?
I hope so. I hope I write the genre I love. Sometimes I resist it weirdly. Like the script that I had that really started to break out was a comedy. And it was the last genre I attempted. And I don't know why. I think it's because I loved comedies. I think when you love something and you know it really well, you kind of know a little bit more how hard it is to actually do it. So I think I resisted doing comedy for so long because I was like, well, you got to be funny on every page and you got to do all this stuff. And when I finally tried it, I remember my manager at the time said, this is great. It's like every single page is funny. And I'm like, isn't that what it's supposed to be? She's like, yeah, but most people can't do that. I'm like, they can't? Like, so it's weird to me that sometimes I've gotten in my own way with that. Like, same thing with Ashland. I love science fiction. It's probably my favorite genre, but it's the first one I attempted. It's my 6th novel, and it's my first true science fiction novel. I think because I read so much science fiction, watched so many movies, I was like, oh man, I have to really have this locked down tight and know the science and know how to do it. Because me as an audience member would have those same criticisms. So I definitely know the genres I like. I think sometimes I need to get out of my own way a little bit.
What does that mean as a writer, get out of your own way?
I think, yeah, that's a good question. I think it's kind of like not letting your decisions to do work be motivated by outside factors. Like, what do I think people want to see? What do I think people will like? What do I think will make me money? I think all that stuff is valid to have those thoughts, but I don't think it's going to make better work. That's definitely true for me. The thing that when I started to sell work, it was what is the thing that I'm most interested in seeing that I feel like I haven't seen out there? Or what is the thing that taps into my specific way of seeing the world or conversations I had? Once I started doing that, suddenly I started getting responses of people being interested in stuff. So that was a big lesson, but it was one that it took me a long time to get there because I think I spent a lot of the first time doing like, here's what I think people would buy. Here's what I think other people would like. Here's what I see is really popular right now. Let me try and do something like that. And it was never motivated by the most important thing, which is your personal passion.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.